Good evening. I would like to call the Infrastructure Committee meeting of July 11th, 2018 for the Corporation of the Town of Lincoln to order. Roll call on my left, committee members Mayor Sandra Easton, Councillor J.D. Pachariva. On my far right, committee member Councillor Paul McPherson. Committee member Wayne McMillan sends his regrets in sitting in this evening. Thank you, Councillor Rob Foster. Staff that's with us this evening, to my left, Dave Graham, Director of Public Works. To my right, our town clerk, Julie Kirklis. In the back row, we have Shannon McKay, our Acting Director of Community Services. Next to Shannon, we have Jillian Harris, our Manager of Environmental Services. Tucked away in the corner, we have Walter Neubauer, our Manager of Technical Services. And in the gallery, if needed, in the bullpen, we have Matt from our IT department. Thank you all, staff, for joining us. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, the first item on our agenda this evening is we have a delegation joining us this evening, and welcome Brett Sears and Christina Valente from WSP to present an update on our transportation master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much for inviting us here tonight to give you an update on the town's transportation master plan. It's my first time in front of you, so I'll just take a moment to introduce myself. I'm a senior project manager in our Transportation Planning and Advisory Services department. Christina is also in that department. We're about 60 strong, and we also have our colleague Wally Menon behind me, who is also part of our team. We wanted to take the opportunity to tell you about the multiple ways we've been consulting and the existing conditions and the beginning work that we've been doing on this project, and also to give you a sense for what's coming in the coming months. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do the sandwich approach to this presentation, where I'm going to do the beginning and talk about the study progress. Christina has been at almost all of the different consultation events. I joined the project toward the end of the first round of consultation, so Christina will fill us in on the different consultation events. I'll come back at the end to talk about the next steps as we move the project forward, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee would have tonight. The Transportation Master Plan, just as a little bit for reference and for background, is being conducted under the municipal class environmental assessment process for master plans. That means there are 3 key items that we need to do. One of them we're doing right now, which is consultation. We wanted to just keep you up to date and keep you informed of our progress as the work goes on and get any feedback. And we're doing that not only with the council, but also with members of the public, surrounding municipalities, different technical agencies, and other stakeholders. To fulfill phase 1 of the EA process, we need to develop an opportunity statement, or a problem or opportunity statement. As someone who's inherently an optimist, I always call it an opportunity statement or a vision statement. And we can recognize that the town is forecast to grow, and so we want to make sure that we are providing the transportation infrastructure to meet the needs of today as well as the future. That, in a nutshell, is our opportunity statement. What we'll be doing as we progress through the summer is analyzing the different data that we've collected and the feedback we've received, because the second item that we have to address are the alternative solutions. We cannot just come up with one plan. This is the world according to Brett Sears, or this is the world according to WSP. We need to look at different alternatives in terms of we want to take into account different people's input, and also consider, well, what if we did it this way or that way? What kind of an impact would it have? So that we can stand in front of you or sit in front of you in the future and be confident about the recommendations that we bring forward. Like I mentioned, we've engaged with the public, the state, different stakeholders, town staff. It's been a pleasure to work with Walter and team so far, and we look forward to continuing that, and as well as you. I know Christina was here for a council workshop. So It's nice to come to a community where the people are very engaged. Sometimes we're at public meetings and we don't get very many. But you'll see through Christina's presentation, we've gone to a lot of different venues, and we have had a number of people coming out. And those venues have stretched from the fall of last year, even up until the early spring of this year. What have we done so far? In addition to all of this consultation, we've been doing some of our initial work and analysis. Christina and some of her team have been out here looking at active transportation. What's here today? Are there any missing links? How could we address those? We've had a couple of staff looking at different intersections that have been identified with some concerns, be it for congestion or geometric concerns that might be dealing with safety. So we've had people out looking at those. We've been looking at what's already been done. The town has already done a lot of good work. Even though this is a transportation master plan, we're not here to reinvent the wheel. So we want to take what's already been done from a town level, from a regional level, from Niagara region, and build upon that. Some of the work items have been a complete streets policy. That's the general framework to say that we want to design the transportation network for all modes of transportation and all transportation users, as well as traffic calming. We know that's often a concern in municipalities. Our people were looking at up to 15 different intersections in the town, in Beamsville, Vineland, and Jordan primarily. Looking at transit, a hot item, I think probably across Southern Ontario right now. Truck routes has come up often, and we've been talking with both the general public as well as the surrounding municipalities on what might be some solutions there. And looking at what we have in place to identify how we want to move forward in the future. And so we've been presenting some of those initial thoughts and those initial pieces of information at a number of different venues, like I said, starting from the fall of last year even into this year. And with that, then I'm going to turn it over to Christina to go ahead and tell you how we engaged and what we heard through these different activities. Christina?
So there are three main points of engagement during the first phase of the study, including a project website where we provide regular study updates and increase awareness of engagement opportunities. The second one being an online survey where we have two distinct surveys to gather input on travel habits as well as opportunities and challenges. And lastly, public and stakeholder sessions where we meet with the public, town staff, and council to get your input. So some results from the online survey, we can see that respondents typically drive most days of the week. 90% of respondents indicated that they drive at least 6 days a week. Majority of respondents live with or travel 30 minutes to their most frequent destination. And in terms of transit priorities, the highest ranked priority was to establish connections to major centers within the region. And respondents also indicated that accessibility, connectivity, and safety were the top three categories to improve the community. So this tells us that residents want transportation options that are convenient and accessible. Most destinations are within a moderate distance, which could help to encourage residents to use alternate modes of transportation if residents thought that it was accessible, connected, and safe. So for the second part of the online survey, 54% of respondents indicated that they felt comfortable cycling in Lincoln, and 80% of respondents indicated that they feel comfortable walking in Lincoln. Through this, we'll use the results and the TMP will include recommendations to improve infrastructure and initiatives that are meant to encourage residents to engage in active transportation and ultimately increase a user's sense of safety and comfort so they feel more inclined to walk and cycle in the town. In addition to the online survey, we held the first public information center on March 27th and 28th. Approximately 55 people attended the session, so it was very well attended. We presented information on the study process, guiding principles such as vision and objectives, as well as existing conditions for truck traffic, parking, active transportation, and roadway conditions. And some of the key themes we heard through the PIC were to improve transit connections throughout Lincoln and to surrounding areas, to enhance options for active transportation and recreation, to address truck traffic and vehicle traffic, to limit access of off-road trails through agricultural lands. And in October of last year, we had our first meeting with the Active Transportation Committee to review the proposed process to identify and develop a town-wide active transportation network, and really to get their feedback on existing conditions, opportunities for new connections, and any gaps that should be addressed through the process. And on April 5th, 2018, we met with council and town staff. It was an interactive session where we presented the existing conditions and asked for your input. There were 4 different stations: transit and parking, active transportation, trucks and good movement, and traffic assessment and traffic calming. So some of the key themes we heard through the workshop were very similar that we've heard through the Public Information Center, through the committee, and even the online survey. Some of the key takeaways are councillors indicated that they want to see improved transit connections within Lincoln and to surrounding areas. They stressed the importance of sidewalks as well as cycling facilities. That the TMP should address heavy truck restrictions and the region's involvement and partnership throughout the study process and the planning process. And on April 18th, 2018, we held a meeting with agency representatives. The purpose of the meeting was to develop an understanding of the work, of ongoing and planned work in their jurisdiction, and how this could impact the TMP, as well as how the TMP could impact the work they are doing. So we had representatives from Niagara Escarpment Commission, the region, St. Catharines, Grimsby, the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, as well as a few staff from MTO.
Well, thank you, Christina. And we were talking to the mayor before the meeting started about that final meeting with the technical agencies and just how pleased we were with the turnout of the different people in terms of getting a number of staff from the Ministry of Transportation here, as well as Niagara Region, City of St. Catharines, your neighbors on either side, St. Catharines and Grimsby, coming to that. So we had a full house. We had maps on the table, and then people were even there were not enough seats at the table. There were so many people there. So we were pleased to see that people see that the town is serious about transportation, and people were coming out to participate. I'm going to wrap up our presentation just to give you some idea of next steps. So now that we've heard from all these different groups, we want to then analyze what they've said with our own technical analysis to look at what best practices, to see what we have found has worked in other places, and then to tailor this for the town of Lincoln in terms of active transportation routes and priorities. When we come back with our recommendations, we don't want to just give you a laundry list, but we want to have it somehow prioritized in terms of like what would we do in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term, to give yourself a manageable amount of how to implement it. It's an implementation plan. So we'll be looking at that from a multimodal perspective in terms of, well, what would we be doing for active transportation? And oftentimes that dovetails directly with the roads, any improvements to roads. How do we want to address transit? What would be the next steps for future truck routes? We know that it's a big challenge. It's one of those things where there's the two sides of the coin. People don't like the trucks, but at the same time, those do represent jobs, and people do want the stores full. And so we're trying to balance everyone's needs in that. We also are looking at parking. And then we'll have some policies that go along with this to try to bring everything together. With the overall overarching policy of complete streets, that we do want to plan for all modes of transportation and all transportation users. We were here a little bit early tonight and saw a number of people out biking on an absolutely beautiful night, so it's nice to see that. But what type of facility are they biking on, and can we enhance that facility and have more people feel comfortable using that mode? So as a timeline, we're going to be doing our analysis through the summer, and then we'll be working with the staff as we develop some draft recommendations. With the election schedule for this fall, we are looking to come back in the beginning of the December, or not the December, but the winter term in 2019, January, February, March, and that timeline to have more engagement both with you and the general public and the different stakeholders, so that by the spring of next year, there will be a complete draft report that we can deliver to the staff, and with the staff input, bring back to you for your consideration and eventual adoption if you so choose. Christine and I appreciate your time tonight. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Brett and Christine. Committee members, I'll start with on my left side. Mary Easton, do you have any questions for the presenters?
I do. Thank you very much. My question is in relation to the truck traffic. I just want to make sure, through you, Mr. Chairman, that you have all the information that you require around the three prongs of the issue, because I didn't, I wasn't clear when you were referencing that, that you were separating out the issues. Has that been done for you?
Through the chair to the mayor, if you'd be happy to repeat those three for myself, that would be wonderful. We know that truck traffic is a major concern, and so it was nice when we had the technical agencies here to talk to the region, to talk to Grimsby, to talk to St. Catharines, all in the same room,
Right.
to try to come up with solutions. We know it's not an easy problem, and we'd love to have a short-term solution, but I'm not sure that exists, or else someone already would have done it. But if you would like I said, I joined working on this project in April, so if you would like to inform me, that would be great.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, is it appropriate for me to do that now?
Absolutely.
There are three matters, and I'm glad that the MTO was involved, because that leads me to believe that they will then have some advice for us, some input on these issues. So the issue of trucks in our midst, as an economic driver of the community, as an important element for the delivery of availability of aggregate, for the buildings that need to be, the building that's happening in West Niagara as well as the rest of Niagara is extremely important. There's no question about it. The question is, do the size of those trucks, do trucks that have large pups attached to them and trucks that have live bottoms on them, do those trucks need to come through the retail areas of town? The second part of that really is in relation to the length of trucks. Do we need 53-foot trucks coming through town, or can we very easily redirect those to a specific truck route? And where would that truck route be? So that's one issue, and I would say that's the day-to-day issue. There's also a second issue that has to do with the avoidance of the weigh scale, which is very much, should be very much an interest for the MTO. And these trucks are coming off the Queen Elizabeth Way. They're also coming up through our east-west roads. We also have them coming down Victoria Avenue and making a left turn onto Regional 81. So the issue of monitoring what's in those trucks and what the bill of lading says in terms of where they're going should be of interest to them. Now, there are solutions that this council can discuss at budget time, and we probably will, but we need to know who's responsible for what parts of these elements. And we've been working with the aggregate industry to find out what the rules and regulations are. And so I think that there will be some improvements there, but monitoring, enforcement, and possibly having the municipality pay for enforcement is something I don't want to have that discussion. I don't think council wants that discussion unless we absolutely have to. It is happening in Grimsby. They're getting a great result. The third part of the issue has to do with, now I think I've forgotten about it, so maybe somebody can help me along here. I may have to come back to this, Mr. Chairman, but there's a third piece to this problem that also requires enforcement. So I don't want anybody leaving the room thinking that this pat answer that relates to economic development is what we're going to be satisfied with. That of course it's important. We know that. We don't need to be told that there's an economic development impact from having truck traffic. That's how everything gets delivered. But not every truck has to come into this community. So I'll think about the other question. The chair will be lenient with me and let me speak again. But I think those two matters need to be taken into serious consideration. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I like the feel of this, where you're going, how this is moving along, and the process that's going into play. I like, I particularly like your comment about the positivity, but also making sure that we have all the alternatives figured out as we're going on as well. Two things that I have some questions about, or one is a comment. Sort of following along with what the mayor was talking about within the trucks, under your we plan to identify, I think safe is an important word that should be in that line that you're doing. Simply put, I know where the mayor's coming from with these things. I think there's things that the region can do to help us with, for example, Mountain here in town. I've talked to the Ministry of Transportation people, and we actually have one of the key guys actually lives in our town in my ward area. I've talked to him, and he said one of the difficulties is it's very dangerous to be checking vehicles out on Mountain before you're coming down. There's very narrow sides to the road, and so really they're taking lives in hand with going out and doing checking. So the whole thing around safe and putting plans in place to give a safe methodology to go through this, I think, is important. I'm going to ask you with the road network and operational improvements, what's the thinking process? Like, where are you going with that? And I'll explain why I'm asking that question when you sort of give me a little broader brush on where you're thinking with that.
Through the chair to the councillor, we're looking at the operational improvements kind of in two prongs. One of them is we've collected data on the turning movements at different intersections, and then we use traffic analysis software to determine a level of service that then gets a grade like you would in school of A through F. And so what we found in our preliminary analysis, which is still in a draft form, is that most of the intersections are operating satisfactorily for urban conditions that would generally tend to be considered satisfactory. But every community is different. And we know that there's been a lot of growth in Lincoln recently. And so if you were here 10 years ago and compare it to today, it probably seems a lot different and maybe worse. And so we're trying to balance what the analysis shows of just the hard numbers with the perception and the experience. And so part of that comes through the site observation and site visits that we're doing. So one aspect is to consider the level of service, which is based on the vehicle delay, how long someone's waiting at a red light, let's say. And then the other aspect that we're looking at is it would be a safety aspect in terms of geometrically, or from an engineering perspective, is there an issue with the physical design of the intersection in terms of the angle? If there is a sightline issue, are these some things that we can see and then come up with a solution to address? So those are pretty much the two prongs. I don't know if that leads you to another question, Councillor, but that's what we're trying to address.
Yes, thank you. And if I may continue. So, yeah, my thing and where I've been going and one of the things that I've been pushing as we've got ourselves into this overall study is to make sure that we know and understand how traffic is really flowing within the municipality and look at things that we can do to either, you know, persuade people to move differently or whatever the case may be. So, for example, Ontario Street is a bit of a mess in the mornings, and we have two massive subdivisions that are coming in at the top of the town. It's not really going to improve that traffic as we're going on, but you know, is there methodologies that we can put into play that's going to encourage people to go out King Street and go down Durham Road and get onto the QEW? Is there methodologies that we can do to encourage people to go over to Bartlett or over to, you know, other side roads to go down and move towards St. Catharines, and to do those types of things as well? So it'll be interesting as you come back with the analysis for us to sort of go and say, okay, you know, here's what we can do as a municipality to straighten a few of these things out. You know, a light here will have the following effect type of thing. And I think Councillor Pachariva and I can both confidently say, you know, we have you know, many times over the last number of years been stating we need key lights at key intersections. And so my hope is that the study is going to show us that, you know, we're not just whistling Dixie. We're basically saying, you know, this is the real valid need for going and doing this. Stadelbauer and King, you know, possibly Lincoln and King, you know, a variety of the other ones. And I got to admit, I'm just focusing on the Beamsville area as I've been a ward councillor here, but you know, it's across the entire town. So anyway, I do appreciate where you guys are going with this. So.
I have Councillor Pachariva and then Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I found your survey results interesting. 54% of the respondents feel comfortable cycling, which shows there's an issue. Your hardcore cyclists will embrace that share the road mentality, but the majority of the people aren't that hardcore cyclists. And I think one of the issues that we have is we've got a connectivity issue with our trail system. So our trails were built at a time when active transportation maybe wasn't looked, or it wasn't viewed at all 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So we constructed these trails and the paths, and the issue is they're single type use paths or trails. And they need to be that multi-use. So instead of being 2.5 meters, they need to be 3 meters, 4 meters. Is the study going to identify deficiencies in that aspect? Because I look at that as low-hanging fruit. That's something that can easily be brought up to a standard that then dramatically increases that connectivity.
Through you, Mr. Chair, definitely through the study process, we're going to be looking at those existing routes and deficiencies and how we can improve those, such as trails, and how we can upgrade existing trails so they're at a minimum standard 3 to 4 meters to accommodate a multi-use facility, so people who want to walk on it and bike on it can do so.
Fantastic. Okay. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, one more, sticking with our upcoming changes. Wondering what your thoughts are on the changes to the cap and trade program, because that was the one that was funding municipal cycling infrastructure upgrades. Any thoughts on where the government might be going? Is that something now that, as we're embracing active transportation, it seems that's completely off their radar? So.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. This is an item that we've heard in other places as well. I was just in Sudbury on Monday, And there was a concern there because they have a couple of projects underway, and they're wondering what will happen in the future. I'm understanding that there's some cutoff in terms of if some projects were already underway, they can't pull the money back, and you might know better than I. But maybe if they hadn't been started, maybe they're in limbo or in danger of losing that funding. We've really seen in the last 5 to 10 years the active transportation sweep across Ontario. There have been manuals developed, and there has been some provincial money and significant provincial money with that $95 million dedicated to that. Will that continue in the future? I'm not sure, but there certainly are a lot of people who want it to continue, and so I'm hoping that it will. And maybe it would take people from your level as well to talk to those at the provincial level that this is important, because we are seeing this whole mentality of complete streets, that we want viable modes of travel and more than one viable mode. And that's what Christina is talking about in terms of making sure, and what you're speaking about, that the facilities are multi-use, that people could use it for recreation, but could also use it to get somewhere. So I'm an optimist, like I said earlier. I am trusting that the groundswell is strong enough to keep this moving forward. Could my colleague add something, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And I think as we move forward with the news of cap and trade, I think the discussion will change to not only just encompass cycling, but really multimodal travel and how we integrate walking and cycling into other modes to get people to first mile, last mile, walk to the transit stop and take transit. And there are other existing funding programs such as PTIF. I mean, that's for transit, but there is some sort of, I think, provision in there for integrating cycling facilities with transit. So I think as we move forward, it's still early on, but we'll see different opportunities arise, and as it relates to multimodal travel as a whole.
Thank you. Councillor Patry, anything further?
No, that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, before I go to Councillor McPherson, I think Mayor Easton has remembered her third prong, so I'll go to Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The question I would ask you on this one is whether or not there was any discussion at any point about the north-south access over the escarpment. Was that included in any of the public meetings that you had?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the mayor. We're looking at several different options. I'm not sure if a specific one has been identified. In some cases, we're looking actually to push it to Grimsby as a crossing, right? So those items are on the table. And then the good news is, like we mentioned, that the Ministry of Transportation and the region and the surrounding municipalities all were at that technical meeting, because oftentimes these are regional roads, but they affect you locally, but they might be a regional road. And so we need to keep that dialogue open. And I know it's front and center on the region's mind as well, or at least it seemed to be at the meeting that we were at. I don't know if that's a good enough answer for you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, through you, I'm happy to know that it was, I don't think you said that it was actually discussed, but you did indicate that it was a piece of the discussion. And I realize that the solution is located in Grimsby, but this is when they begin their transportation master plan in 2019. This subject will come up. But in the meantime, the three mayors of West Niagara met about 2 weeks ago, and we again talked about this along with some other mutual matters. And we were also talking about the importance of the reintroduction of the across the escarpment, the main across the escarpment project, that corridor. So I'm happy to know that they're on the table, but I think I would be disingenuous if I didn't tell you that I will be looking for some strong encouragement when it comes to some of these solutions, because these are solutions which have been on the table for maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe more. My colleagues will know better. There have been promises made. So we're going to be looking for solutions. In fact, the environmental assessment on the north-south access was to be done by now. The commitment was made in the last term between the Mayor of Grimsby and the Mayor of Lincoln. So I'll certainly be looking for that to have a fairly high profile. That's a major, major solution for a number of our problems. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, thank you for tonight and for the update. This is obviously a very significant project for both this and the next term of council here. You mentioned in your opening comments your opportunity statement. I think it was something to the effect of the town is growing. So we're not just looking at today, we're also looking at the future, and I was very happy to hear that, knowing what is coming to this town from a growth standpoint and really the impact that that growth is going to have on our transportation routes and on all of the items that you listed there. So the near future is as important as today, because within the next 10 years, we're probably looking at adding 8,000 to 10,000 people to the town. So, in a town of 23,000, that's a pretty significant hit. So, the traffic flows in the major urban areas, are going to be impacted significantly, and your plan, I'm sure, will include that, and will put recommendations to us on how we manage that, because quite frankly, we're leaning on this transportation master plan many times when we're being asked about busy roads today and by our current residents, and they know these developments are coming, and what's it going to be like. And we understand that their lives are probably changing, that this quiet little town is getting busier, but we're leaning on this plan to say we are doing something about it. We are looking at a full plan, a long-term plan on our transportation, and we're making the investment now. So very timely. I did have a couple of quick questions. One was, I didn't see it in, or maybe I missed it. You said at the PICs that you had 55 people. How many online respondents did you get? Do you have that number?
The Chair, I don't have that number with me, but I can find out. And
I'd be interested to know how many people are.
Yeah, I will find out the number.
Yeah, it'd just be interesting to see, and to see how many people are comfortable with an online response. It's always challenging to get people out, and 55 seems to be a pretty good number. The only other question I had was, how much does parking come into play in a transportation master plan generally?
Through the chair to the councillor. So parking is part of our scope of work, and we have done some preliminary analysis in terms of the availability of parking and then how much of it is used. I would appreciate maybe your own perspective on that in terms of, is there a parking problem? In a transportation master plan, we've done a multiple across Ontario. Parking is probably not in most of them.
Right.
It's not in most of them, but it is in a couple. And so recently we have done a parking study in Centre Wellington, specifically in Elora and Fergus. And there was a perception of a lack of parking. So we did a study that looked at the occupancy of the parking on public parking, as well as the duration of stay. And so what we learned from the data was that if implemented some type of a enforced parking time limit, they would have the turnover that they wouldn't actually need to provide any more spaces. It's the old conundrum of the shop owner saying there's not enough parking, but they parked right in front of their shop themselves. And actually, that's what the data were showing us, is that about 15% of the people, of the cars parked, were there for 4 hours or more. And so we would assume something like that would show that someone is working. They're not just shopping if they're there that long. And so if in those situations in Elora and Fergus, we were looking at specific areas, not the whole downtown wide, but on the prime areas that you'd want to see turnover, to try to have a time limit so that you would see that turnover. And then your customer base, you would actually perhaps see more customers because of the parking turning over. It would accommodate more vehicles. So I would love to know your own thoughts on if there is a parking, if you think there's an issue in terms of not enough parking, or what we often will also find is maybe there is enough parking, but is it where people want it to be? And of course, everyone would like to just drive up to the front, but, and how do we also sign it? How do we alert people of where there is available parking? And so our approach in Center Wellington is less on let's provide more parking and more about how can we manage the parking that we have better to meet both today and in the future.
Yeah, and I didn't want this to become a parking master plan. Where there is a lot of other discussions that we're having as far as our parking. It's not just in the downtown. We have residential developments that have parking challenges, and we are building out medium, high-density areas that, will have plenty of cars that are coming, so that will be a part of the mix as well. So, people generally, from what we've seen, don't move away from their two-story, two-car garage house into a townhome and get rid of cars. They keep their cars, and so that then starts to get challenging when you have a single-car garage with a single-car driveway and you have 3 cars or whatever. But anyway, I appreciate you coming tonight and the update, and look forward to more, later on this fall and into the winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Just a couple comments. Some of them will be repetitive, but thank you for the presentation. Early in your presentation, you mentioned that this has been a very engaged community. I would suggest that is a reflection of the work that you guys have done, because we have many PICs where we have no engagement whatsoever. So I would basically thank you for the work that you have done to date in your public and stakeholder sessions. Your workshops have been exceptional, in my opinion, the public information centers and the online survey. So I think the reason you're seeing very engagement is a direct reflection on the work you're doing, and we thank you for that. And I really want to take the time to thank Director Graham and Walter for the work they've done. And I'm really glad to see Shannon here this evening, because I'm sure you're very well that we are also doing a Parks Master Plan. And you've mentioned through your presentation a number of times, I think I counted 6 times that you mentioned active transportation. We talked about connectivity and filling in gaps. So that's what's really important to us is we have parks, we have trails, but we have lots of gaps, and we have connectivity problems. And as Councillor Pachariva indicated, we have trails. We just recently had a little bit of a bike rodeo where we took kids and families out on bikes. But part of the problem, as Councillor Pachariva indicated, is these trails are too narrow. And we actually have them, if you can believe it, like we have signs out there that say no cycling. So here we are trying to promote cycling with a very engaged active transportation committee, and we have signs that say we don't want bikes on there. So I don't know if you've seen that, just pointing it out, but I'm really glad that Walter and Dave are engaging community services here as we move forward with this transportation master plan. The 15 hot spot intersections, as Councillor Foster indicated and as you indicated, one of the problems we have here is we have regional roads that intersect our roads. So quite often when we do these engagements and we do studies, the region comes back and says there's no need for an intersection there, no light, because the numbers don't indicate it. But the region doesn't know the growth that we're experiencing like we know what we're experiencing. So we really look forward to seeing that information come back in those hotspot intersections, because as we go into an election year in October, we're going to hear that at the door, that we have traffic problems. And you mentioned that one of the top 3 items, I forget the exact connotation, but I noted it that in the priorities, in the top 3, safety was in that top. We're going to hear that all the time, safety. And so that really needs to be looked at, because we can't let the region just indicate that it's not needed, because we know there's growth here and it's going to continue to change. As Mayor Easton indicated, with regards to the truck traffic, it's a huge problem. I think you're very well aware of it, but we have had some great success with enforcement by using the MTO and the Niagara Regional Police in collaboration to do some safety blitzes, and we've been very successful there. So I hope that's part. We have a new Niagara Regional Staff Sergeant that's just moved into the area. We're hearing he's willing to get engaged. We hope that we can do that. So I just want to point that out, that I think a huge issue for the truck safety is the enforcement in collaboration with the MTO and the NRP. Other than that, I want to thank you both, all 3 of you, for your attendance this evening and your presentation. Thank you very much. Have a motion? So I have a motion moved by Sandra Easton and seconded by Councillor Pachariva that the presentation by WSP be received. Your pleasure on the motion, and that is carried. Good evening, folks. Thank you. We had some correspondence in the agenda, the Active Transportation Advisory Committee minutes of May 24th. Are there any questions with regards to that correspondence? Councillor Pachariva.
Yeah, thanks through you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe this is a question to Ms. Kirkelos going forward. A little bit of a frustration with our minutes is that, committee makes some recommendations in here, then they aren't acted upon. And wondering what the process might be going forward will be, and is that one of the governance recommendations with you, Julie, or someone else from the clerk's office being there, and then those directions can be disseminated properly, because it was a little disheartening at our last meeting when we made these recommendations. Councillor Brunet went to Italy, arranged barbecues to be used, and we talk about a barbecue, but a barbecue never happened. So just wondering how we can fix that gap.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So you have staff sitting on this active committee. So if there are recommendations or things to come forward, that can come forward in form of a report. But in speaking with to your point, with the governance review and the changes coming forward with the procedural bylaw, so we plan on having a clerk being active in these citizen advisory committees, and we will help to manage that going forward in the new year.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Yes, thank you. In the minutes, and I excuse me if I didn't catch this as I was going through earlier meetings that we may have had, but I saw that Councillor Pachariva highlighted that King William and William Street are getting lights. I'm assuming it's that's the overhead lights for crosswalks and stuff like that. Can I make a suggestion back in and through, and something for staff to maybe take away from this? I've watched this within our municipality over and over again, and people just do not handle crosswalks properly. I mean, it's like, you know, they don't understand that when there's a person there and they stick their hand out, there's an obligation for them to be stopping and letting them go across. That's what crosswalks are all about. And I've seen it on John Street many times, and I've seen it on others as well. So maybe it might be a really good idea that, you know, in our education programs and stuff that we're doing, we should be, you know, doing a reminder back in and through. Perhaps maybe our communications people can go and do this, particularly as we approach the fall season for schools and stuff like that again. So anyway, I think it's something that wouldn't hurt us as it's going on. So thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a detailed design of the Jordan Village Improvements Project Award PW 18-19. Director Graham?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an exciting report. We're finally moving into the detailed design of this very exciting project for the town. Finally got through the EA process, so now we're looking at awarding the services for the detailed design work. I'm happy to answer any questions if committee has questions about the report particulars.
How did I know you would be your first to put up the hand? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and couldn't agree more. It is very exciting to see this report. I think there is one question I had to ask was in the next steps, your second item says Q4 2019. I think that's Q4 2018. Is that right?
Through Mr. Chairman, yes, it is.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I do have a question, Mr. Director, on how does the design process work, and how do we interact with the design process?
Through Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. I mean, I think, you know, one comment I would have is this project is for us, like a generational project to be involved in. And this is not just a standalone public works road reconstruction project. This is going to cross all departments within the municipality. So, you know, internally, we're going to be meeting after council awards this project with community services, planning, finance, basically all other departments within the town, and work together on this project as a team, and with communications looking at what that looks like. And we're also going to be discussing how council's role in this, because we do want council to be involved in this project as we go through the design process, and sharing and engaging your thoughts as we go through the detailed design. So I think, like I say, internally we're going to meet and kind of come up with a plan and look at our, you know, how we're engaging stakeholders. I mean, there's many stakeholders as it relates, you know, to the businesses and that in the area. There's the residents, but we will be involving council through the process. Once we have, you know, something for you to take a look at. I don't know if that helps or not, but.
Well, I think my question is, you know, I couldn't agree more that this is a very important project for this community. And for us to get this right is critical. You know, this is going to be, is right now, but is going to be even more so a key piece of our tourist industry. And to get it right from a design standpoint is absolutely vital. You know, to maintain the quaintness, if you will, still to enhance that, and not to build out a, you know, downtown, you know, look and feel, and you know what I'm saying is do we get involved in the actual design, and do we, Or do we have them come to us in the process and what do you think so far? Or here's 2 options. Or, rather than 6 months from now, here it is, folks, and, well, you missed it. And then we delay it another 6 months. So is this a different project for us in that we need to be more in sync with what they're doing, I don't know, quarterly or, whatever it is, and give us some idea of where you're going with this thing? Is that a fair question?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, definitely. I mean, I think, council needs to be involved right at the beginning as we get started. And, we want to share information on, here's what we're thinking, what does council think, kind of at the, like the 30% stage almost. What we don't want to do is get, far down the road in the design and then present something to council that, council's not comfortable with or has concerns. So by all means, yeah, I mean, council needs to be involved in this at the onset.
Okay.
For input, comment, et cetera.
That's all I have.
Yeah.
Mr. Foster?
Yes, thank you. To echo Councilor McPherson, long overdue as we're getting going with this, and everything old is new again. We do have some stuff that was done in this area, and in fact, that's where some of the preliminary pieces of this puzzle have come into play. One of the things that I'd really like, if going through this again, I'd really like to understand as a councillor is what are the things that we can't do as it's going on. Like, for instance, yes, it's a mess of a traffic situation going on there, but fixing it up, what can't we do? Like, it's, we had discussions about, possibly doing a roundabout, but of course there's not near enough property to go and do that. But, what makes sense to go and deal with things in this particular area? So, because once the public gets involved, it would be really good, like, you don't want to set bad expectations, I guess, as it's going on. Like, if there's some things we simply can't do based on road laws or ministry laws or whatever the case may be, we should have those things out there early on, just so that, we don't destroy the expectations as we're going on. So anyway, just my thoughts on that. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question then about what this project really involves, because I understood that the road design was completed. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, it is. So through the EA process, now we have a concept
Right.
or a template, if you will, framework. So now we're taking that framework and putting the detailed design basically in that framework so that we can get to something that we can build.
Okay, so we know we had 5 roads. It was 5 corners. We know now we're going to deal with 4. We know which one goes north and south, and we know which one only goes south. Okay. And we also know that there was a tribunal held. Is that right? It was a tribunal?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
To discuss the design issues at the south end of Main Street. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And to Councillor Foster's point, there are some outcomes from that are going to give us direction. I think that's what Councillor Foster was referring to. Okay, so then we know that Snewer Road is, the location of that has been determined. We know that there's going to be 2-way traffic up to a point, and then there isn't going to be any traffic. These are some of the fundamentals that I thought had already been determined. And so is it the list, through you to Councillor Foster, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Foster, is that the list that you're talking about? What are those givens? Through you, Mr. Chairman, if Councillor Foster could just confirm with me.
No, no, that's not what I was thinking. Like, it seems to me that this process that's now embarking with this there is going to be a lot of discussion about design, et cetera. I mean, I don't think our final design is totally complete at this point, is it? I mean, you know, there's a bunch of ideas that have come into place, and there's a lot of decisions the council is going to have to make in order to fulfill these things as we're going down the road. So
Okay.
I just like,
So
when we came out originally from the thing, and you know, I've never really participated all that much in infrastructure. Sorry, Dave, it's not been the committee that I've always attended. But the thing is that there were a number of options that came forward. Well, Councillor Patry, you were the chair of the thing. There were a number of options, and I don't think we've totally finalized what's going on with that. I think there's a really good idea. I think using Snare Lane, you know, blocking it off, doing all that type of stuff, I think is great. But it just, I don't know where the public process is going to go to with this. So that's my concern. Like,
Okay, Mr. Chairman, then, if that's the case, I'm looking at this copy, and it's the bullet point on page 18 where it says, it's the third one down where it talks about the streetscape, but it's very general. I guess the bottom, where I'm going is there anything about this next stage of the process that opens a door for people who have self-interest to take this to another tribunal? I think that's my question. Or is there something about the process that can hold it up? And I just want to state one more thing. When we deal in the planning area, let's just use Prudhome's as an example. People say they had 8 or 12 issues, and we just negotiated them through. And there wasn't any talk of OMB or anything else. It was just a matter of working them through and trying to find out where people were coming from. That took a long time because it was a very formal process. We're now talking about design. And I just want to be clear that this isn't going, this thing can't be derailed because 1 or 2 people decide that they're just going to sit in the middle of the road. That would really be a concern of mine. So I need to understand that better. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Director Graham kicking me ferociously through the wall here, so I think Dave wants to make a couple comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, maybe I can just sort of clarify it a little bit further for committee. So really the heavy lifting and all the major work is completed. Like, so we went through a municipal Class EA process, which was, you know, pretty, long process. And so what came out of that is we've decided that the best way to fix that intersection, for example, is Main Street's going to be closed. We're going to have a pedestrian square. 19th Street's going to be the main realigned working intersection. And through the EA process, there's mandatory public consultation and appeal processes. So all that's done. So right now, we basically have to figure out what we want the square to look like. What amenities do we want in that square? You know, how is it going to be built? That level of detail. But through the design process, we still want to be engaging the public and showing them, you know, here's what we want to build. Give us your comments, input. But there's not any formal appeal process through this stage. So.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I guess the piece that it was really the square, that area of the square. So it isn't a question of, is it going to be or isn't it going to be? That's all been decided. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Councillor McPherson.
I'll be very quick, Mr. Chair, and my thinking is more along the design side. I think the plan is done, and I'm thinking more, you know, what are the street lamps like? What is the landscaping like? What does the sidewalk look like? What is the square? You know, that's my thinking is, how do we make that the best we can make it? That's what I was going with in my question. Thank you.
So before I move on, Walter, I know you've...
You got one more.
Okay. Before I go to Councillor Patriva, I wanted to thank Walter for the work he's done in this report. I know this has been a project you've been heavily involved in. Did you have any comments with regards to any of that discussion there? I don't want to put you in the hot seat, but I want to recognize your efforts on this project.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, Public Works is considering this to be a community building project, not so much an engineering project. We're going to be engaging with all departments within the town to talk about those things that you just mentioned, Councillor, which is what is this going to look like? How's it going to look? How's it going to feel? What's the best end product from all perspectives, not just engineering? So there's still a lot of work to be done, but the framework is there, and we expect to move this along as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Walter. Councillor Patriva, saving the best for last.
Oh, okay, Chair Brunet, thank you for teeing me up like that. Just curious, because this has probably been going on since 2004, and there were aspects, oh yeah, Your Worship, yeah, there was. So we've got the technicalities all worked out. There was some initial aspects of the Parsons design, you know, with Civic Square, with things like that. Like, are we going to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater? Or are we going to take the good things from that, where we had Snur Lane reconstructed, and we had the medians, and we had the planters, and you know, through Councillor McPherson's initiatives, and also when I was there, and you know, people wanted to chain themselves to the trees, that when we're going to remove these stately trees, we're going to replace them with not saplings, but something of a mature stock that will, you know, enhance the neighborhood. So are we going to get the good aspects we liked about that? And second question would be, keeping with the two-question rule, are we going to tie in once and for all the final paving and finishing of the parking lot beside the fire hall? Because I don't see that highlighted in the detailed design.
Through Mr. Chairman, good questions. So I think the first question to the councillor, there's been a lot of good work done, a lot of good base work done. That we're not reinventing the wheel, for sure. So we're going to utilize all that work that's been done to help us get the detailed design finished. In related to the parking lot, that's really the next phase of this. So I mean, the parking lot, and again, just for committee's information for those who may not know, so in the secondary plan for Jordan, the land, which is kind of where the old Sand Dome used to be and where the Magic Bus is operating out of, we're going to be reconstructing a brand new public parking lot in that area, streetscape, beautification, etc. So we first need to get the design work done and these streets done with the servicing and everything to accommodate that parking lot, but that would be the next phase of this for sure. So I think what we want to do when we're looking at our 2019 budgets and our budgets, we want that parking lot ideally to sort of align and dovetail right with this work. This work needs to occur first, but for sure we need to look at the timing of that. Okay.
Yeah, and if I may, through you, Chair Brunet, I mean, going back to those, you know, those early stages of 2003, 2004, and Councillor Foster can remember this, is that, you know, the building of the fire hall and that parking lot was contingent upon the, you know, the redesign, and it was not supposed to happen after the fact, but concurrent. So if we need to design that parking lot and the Sand Dome's been taken down, like that should be part and parcel, because again, you don't want to be disrupting brand new construction to tie in something else. Should all happen together. That was the original plan. That's what I've always had in my back pocket. So I would recommend, if that needs to be brought to the front burner, we do it, so it happens concurrently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the good discussion on this report. We have a motion moved by Councillor Patriva and seconded by Councillor McPherson. That report PW 18-19, the detailed design of the Jordan Village Improvement Project Award, be received as information, and that council award the contract for consulting services for the detailed design of the Jordan Village improvements to IBI Group for the amount of $197,250, excluding HST, and that the full cost of the Jordan Village Improvement Detailed Design Phase 2 be approved and funded as outlined in the financial section, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign and seal the contract documents on behalf of the municipality. Your pleasure on the motion, and that is carried. The next report this evening is PW 18-20, the Vineland West Private Water System Water Main Upgrade Project Tender Results, contract number 2-4-431057-33150. Hopefully committee members have read the report. Do we have any questions regarding the report? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've read through the report and some of the comments on differing in costs and things like that that have been going on, but I'm okay for the most part with this. I'm going to kind of reiterate something that's been bugging the heck out of me with this since day one on this. Back, a millennium ago, we made a decision at this council to go and do a self-funding water and sewer system. The idea is that me as a consumer of water and septic systems here in the Beamsville area am paying a premium in order to make sure that I have the monies stored in our savings so that we can go and in the future have that replaced, and it's not going to cost me any additional funds, as well as making sure that we're operationally good with this. I am annoyed as heck that there's $320,000 coming out of that fund towards this. The simple reality on this thing is that this is anybody else who's coming into this development. If we're with the building of the subdivisions up at the top of Beamsville, the down at Prudhome's, they're all paying for their initial hookup. Like there's no, like with all of the various fees with everything else that's coming into play, they are paying for it. I wouldn't even be upset if we as a council say, gee, this is a problem that we have to deal with, and we need to be taking $320,000 out of our general revenues to go and put towards this thing because it's something that we have to do as a council. But it annoys the crap out of me that we're actually pulling it from funds that the rest of us have been putting away for very specific reasons, and we have been telling the public all the way along with, and yet we're going to go and use that for funding a private water system. So I don't know, guys. This does not pass the smell test by any stretch in my view. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Any other comments? Mayor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, we have, and I think probably Councillor Foster could make the list better than I could, all kinds of legacy projects of this ilk that have had to be corrected. Some of them may not even be corrected. But things were done in a completely different way, and people did go ahead and take it upon themselves to put in private systems, and there's no question that this is a major issue. And if it was something else, if it wasn't water, of course we wouldn't have the Ministry of the Environment standing over us. So I just want to clarify that the councillor isn't saying that we shouldn't do the work. He's suggesting that we've chosen the wrong pocket to get the money out of. So, Mr. Chairman, maybe we should have that discussion then. What are the alternatives? Is it general revenues? What are the implications? I guess the other question is there an urgency to this? Because now that I've spoken to it, maybe somebody else could suggest that we defer it for discussion on the finances alone. Do we have everybody here that could answer that question, those questions tonight? That's the question I would have.
So, Councillor Foster brings up a great point. As he indicated before, he's not on infrastructure, so there has been a number of discussions about what's transpired down in this private sector. So I'm just going to go to Director Graham to maybe just speak for a minute about what has been transpiring in terms of the metering and the payments that these residents have been paying. So, Director Graham, if you could just maybe address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Foster. So, Councillor Foster raised some good points on that. I can understand how you feel about the water reserves, but I think it's important to note, and when we were early on in trying to make these decisions on, is the municipality, kind of through the standard of care, are we going to step up to the plate and fix this water system properly? When we did a lot of the research on the historic practices, the fact is that the people who are on this private system have been paying water bills to their properties, to the town, full, the same price as anyone else. It hasn't been discounted or anything else. So I think that was kind of, in speaking with the MOE as well, and that was one of the kind of tipping points for the municipality to say, listen, we do have a responsibility here to kind of make this right, if you will, because I think it was probably the last 35 to 40 years, we had records indicating that these people have been paying their water bill just like anyone else for their water. So I think when you look at that side of the situation, it is, appropriate to use water reserves because they have been paying into it. At least that's, my opinion as anyways, so.
And that's fair enough. I don't like it, but you make a valid point. I just the whole concept around putting water. I mean, we've talked about putting water into Camden, and I mean, it's going to cost a fortune to go and do that. So the question is, if we actually do decide to do that someday, is it because cisterns are going to be looked at as the MOE as not being the right thing? Am I, who's been paying into this for the last number of years, going to end up having to foot the bill to put that in? I mean, I think we're going to have to be really careful as we go down the road with this, because this is setting, I think, maybe not a real good precedent for other situations that may be coming up in the future.
Councillor Patrieva.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you know what? I think it's the right place to come from the water reserves. Like Director Graham said, they've been paying into it. So they have been paying for this service for a number of years, so they are afforded that service. It may not be $320,000. We've got $160,000 there for contingency. It might be a bit less. And when we talked about Camden before, Councillor Foster, they were going to come under a special area charge. We weren't going to fund them through water reserves. And I think this is two different stories here. So these people have always had the water. They've been paying for it. So much like the ones that live in the urban area, they're due their upgrades. But when we come to Camden, that's a whole different story. There's been no payment. There's been no contribution to that water reserve. So and I would suggest when time does come to that, we look at a special area charge for that area to connect to water. But that's too getting the region to acquiesce, and the whole conversation there. We could have had it running down Fly Road, but in their infinite wisdom at that time, they sought not to do it. And yeah.
Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, I also think this is the right place to get it from. Yeah, it's a hit. It's bringing our cousins into the family, so to speak, and the fact that they've been paying all along helps, I think, make this decision. You know, if they had been operating their water system like we do up in Waynfleet, where we have a independent water system, and I wish we were on the town water, but, you know, I agree with you, Rob. It's just, it's frustrating to see this, but I think it makes sense to come out of water reserves as opposed to a general fund. And, you know, I say, let's do it, let's get it behind us, and let's move on, you know, so, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Again, I thank committee for some good discussion on this report. So we have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Foster. The contract number 2-4-431057-33150, the Vineland West Private Water System Water Main Upgrade Project tender results be received as information, and that council award the contract for the Vineland West Private Water System Water Main Upgrade Project for the tender amount of $857,030, excluding HST, to A. Van Egmond Construction, and that the firm of Cole Engineering be retained to provide contract administration and full-time inspection services at a cost of $53,670, excluding HST, and that council approve the transfer of $320,909 from the water reserves, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign and seal the contract documents on behalf of the municipality. Your pleasure on the motion. And that is carried. Councillor inquiries. Do we have any this evening? Councillor Pachariva.
Just a quick one, Mr. Chairman. Just an update, if we can, David, on our roadside mowing. So our program and the regions, driving to Grimsby today along the service road, I mean, the grass is, you know, it looks like they've cut it in parts, but where there's the guide rails or where there's the reflective strips, they need to be weed whacked, and none of that's done. And I mean, there's that you know, whole awareness with Lyme disease, and Niagara's a hotspot for ticks, and you know, just wondering where we are on that as an update, and you know, coming to meeting tonight, the storm retention pond, the dry one at the corner of Bartlett and Green Lane. Again, we cut a foot around the outside and we don't do anything else. But, like, I think we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard, right? And so just if we could maybe, you know, get that information from the region. And again, it's all about communicating. So, you know, having that up, hey, you know, they're going to cut this week, just to inform the residents what's what when, you know, when you get those calls. Just your thoughts on that.
Director Graham.
Through Mr. Chairman, a good comment on the regional mowing. What I can do is I'll get a better schedule from the region that is something we can share through communications. I know we've been sharing what we're doing with roadside mowing. It's on the website and social media of kind of our program and what to expect when. So definitely if we can bring the region's schedule into that, I think that makes a lot of sense. In regards to stormwater management pond, I'll follow up on that one. I know initially the grass, our service contractor had difficulty cutting in the spot down on the bottom that was wet and they got stuck and stuff. So I think they've avoided some of that, but now that it's drier, maybe we can have another look at it. I can check into that.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Councillor Foster.
Just a quick thing, and I know Dave is aware of this. First of all, I'll start off by saying the last time I looked at the weather forecast, we're looking at like for the next 3 weeks of nothing but sunshine and heat coming into play. The construction that's been going on along Conkle Creek, of course, is winding along. But as Dave knows, we had a complaint from a citizen, and quite justifiable, I might add, after I went and visited his house, about the plume of dust that's been going into places. So I'm just hoping that the construction guys are maintaining their, keeping things and trying to control the dust as best they can. I suspect we're going to have numerous complaints about this. The sad part is that it's this lovely red Beamsville clay, and it sticks to everything. If it even gets mildly wet, even with dew and stuff like that in the morning. So anyway, just keep in mind and hopefully remind them that they need to be minding that construction site as it's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and compliments to the Public Works team for the lovely flower bed out in front of the Beamsville Pizza Joint. Very, very, very nice, and it's timely with the barrels going into downtown. It made it look very good. Question on when we were at the floodplain meeting, a question about flooding in the Beamsville Trailer Park came up. Is there any update or anything, any comments that you may have, Mr. Director, on? I know it's kind of a joint owner of the property, the CN Rail folks, and ourselves, and I just wonder, are we going anywhere with it, or is there anything we need to do?
Through Mr. Chairman to Councillor McPherson, yeah, that's been an ongoing issue. It's a problematic situation in terms of significant drainage kind of comes from the escarpment direction down along Sand Road, comes all the way down past Trailer Park, then turns and goes along the railway right away. So it's during major storms, we do have localized flooding in that area, in the ditches and whatnot. What we're doing as staff, we're trying to look at the roadside ditching system to see if we can do any modifications to help provide some better storage and stuff. So we're looking at some potential design options that might help. We're also lobbying CN to do work on their property. We really think that if CN were to re-ditch the ditch that needs to runs along the CN property and it eventually gets to Bartlett Creek, that really needs to be maintained. So CN's done some limited brushing, but it really needs some more significant work. So, we are, trying to work with CN on getting some cooperation on that.
Okay, that's great. I don't know if there's a play here for the owner of the property as well. There seems to be, this isn't our problem. This is the town's problem, or this is CN's problem. And I wonder if there isn't a opportunity to get CN and the town and the owner of this property in a meeting and talk about, okay, how are we going to resolve this?
Sure. Through Mr. Chairman, yeah, by all means, I think that would be helpful. If we can get CN here, we could definitely set up a meeting and make sure the landowner's there as well, because that's important for them to at least share what they're experiencing and know that we're trying to help. So I'll take that back.
Councillor Pachariva.
Yeah, sorry, Councilor Chair Bernay. I don't know whether I imagined this or not, but speaking on Conkle Creek, was there not an email that came out that Mr. Neubauer would be taking us on a tour? And I checked for Walter's email, and it didn't come from Walter, and it didn't come from Dave. Who did it come from?
That'll come up under announcements. I'll touch on that.
Okay, thank you.
Got that covered.
Okay.
Mayor Easton, any inquiries or everything? It's all good?
It's all good.
Okay. I have just a couple of quick ones. So with regards to the road rehabilitation program and specifically ditching, Director Graham, I know the last couple years, I believe with Norjon at the helm of the road rehabilitation, we combined ditching in preparation for when the road rehabilitation crews went in. I just recently spoke to a couple who are ecstatic that work on Yonge Street is taking place in terms of the road rehabilitation, and yet the ditching remains untouched. And right now in July, if you go up there, there's water there that's about 3 feet, stagnant water sitting in the ditches. So they're just concerned and a little bit questioning as to why we went ahead with the road rehabilitation without first doing the ditching. So Director Graham, if you could just comment on that.
Through Mr. Chairman, so in that particular case on Yonge Street, there's more to it than just doing roadside ditching. And so what, you know, through the road rehabilitation program, obviously we want to get the roadside ditching maintained if it needs to be maintained. But what we need to do up at the Yonge Street area where you're referring to, and our staff are planning on doing a survey, it involves ditching onto going through private properties. So it's really a bigger issue to fix the drainage in that area along the roadside ditch than just roadside ditching specifically. So I mean, if it's helpful, we could reconfirm that with the resident up there that you know, this is something that we're looking at or we need to assess, but it's a bigger, broader issue than just roadside ditching.
Okay, thank you. The only other comment I had, CN came up a few times there. I've noticed recently, and I don't live close to the tracks, so I don't know if this is a problem that's becoming more of a problem, but I'm seeing on social media and I'm hearing from people in the residents about the whistle blowing. It seems like we talk about that on a fairly regular basis. I don't know if it's getting worse or if it's the same, but I see a lot of people complaining about whistle blowing. I don't know if that's a subject that's, you know, we're hearing, if it's a concern or if it's just something that is just that, blowing in the wind. Director Graham, is there anything crossing your desk on that subject these days?
Through Mr. Chairman, not recently. I mean, I know we had quite a discussion. I mean, some Councillor Foster could probably make some good comments. I know he's had involvement a few terms ago on it, and it came up earlier in this term, where we've taken the position that it's, you know, there's a lot of concerns if we ask CN to silence their whistles. There's a report that, you know, I could share with committee if you're interested that we did, if that's helpful. But as far as resident complaints, we haven't been receiving any directly, new ones as is recent, but.
This again, what's old is new again. This has come out about 3 times in the last 10, 15 years, and each time staff have come with a report basically saying, like, we're going to have to spend $25,000 to do a study, and I'm sure it's more now than what it was earlier, and it was always cut out of the budget process. So I can tell you, even campaigning over in the Bartlett and Green Lane area, those trains coming down through there, it is unbelievably noisy coming across that particular intersection as it goes through. I mean, I live on Cedarbrook, so you hear them, but it's like you get used to them, right? But there's some definite tunnel things that are going on in some of those areas, so I don't know. And then you get Paul Labatt, who came out to the public meeting when we were talking about it, saying he loves the sound of train whistles. Why would you guys ever want to get rid of them? So anyway, it's a classic.
Okay, I do not believe we have any notice of motion. So under announcements, I was going to speak to I believe it's in our calendars. Friday, July the 20th, there's the Conkle Creek site tour. We are to meet, for those that are interested, meet at the Sobeys car parking lot. And the tour, I believe, is to start at 3 o'clock. Is that correct, Walter? He's nodding his head. So 3 o'clock, Conkle Creek site tour at the Sobeys parking lot on Friday, July the 20th at 3 p.m.
Who did that come from?
Might have been Andrea.
Might have been Andrea?
I think
Okay.
it might have been Andrea. Andrea, I think.
Came from Walter and I. Walter and I went
Yeah.
on the agri.
No,
The email. And I think Andrea was,
Was it? Okay, 'cause I thought I dreamt.
It should drop right into your calendar on your town phone.
I can't get back to old emails either. Okay.
We have no closed session, and I call the meeting.
Walter's.
Oh, Walter. Walter.
Sorry, a question just came up about what to wear. So it is an active construction zone, so if you are planning on attending, we need full PPE, so work boots, hard hat, and a vest.
Do we have helmets?
we'll provide the.
Will that be provided, or?
Yeah. Yes. Not the work boots, though.
That's a word, no.
The helmet Balderas.
Safety vest?
Vests and hard hats would be provided,
Yeah.
but
I got work boots.
you got work boots.
I have my own.
We have no closed session? I call the-
See?